Okay, so have you ever found yourself, like, caught in one of those endless debates, about really abstract, big questions, but meanwhile, there's something much more immediate that needs attention?
Yes. Or maybe you felt a bit frustrated when someone you respect, a guide perhaps, just stays silent on certain philosophical things you really want answers to.
Exactly. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of situation.
We are. We're looking at a really foundational text from the Buddhist tradition. It's called the Cūḷamāluṅkyovādasuttaṃ.
And it offers some pretty profound insights into what actually matters when you're really seeking wisdom, seeking liberation from, well, suffering.
Our source today is right from the text itself, yeah. It's a conversation recorded there between the Buddha and one of his disciples.
Right. And our mission, I guess, is to try and understand why the Buddha deliberately left certain big questions unanswered or undeclared.
And what that teaches us really about where to focus our energy. Focusing on knowledge that directly helps, that alleviates suffering, leads to genuine well-being.
It's about figuring out what knowledge is actually beneficial for you.
Exactly.
So let's dive in. We meet this disciple, Venerable Māluṅkyaputta. The text says he's meditating, but he's feeling this real dissatisfaction deep down.
Yeah, he's bothered. Really bothered. Because the Buddha hasn't declared his stance on certain specific views, these big questions. The Pali word is abhikatani. Basically, the Buddha put them aside, refused to get drawn in.
And Māluṅkyaputta finds this unacceptable.
It seems so. It's fascinating because he sees getting answers to these intellectual puzzles as, well, a prerequisite. Like, I can't proceed spiritually until you tell me these things, which is, a very human thing to do.
Totally. We want all the answers first. So what were these questions specifically? There were quite a few, right?
There are 8 categories he was fixated on. Things like, is the world eternal or is it not eternal?
Okay, big cosmic stuff.
Right. Sim. Is the world finite or infinite? And then questions about the self or existence. Is the soul, the life principle, the jiva, the same thing as the body, the sarata, or is it different?
Still pretty fundamental questions people ask today.
Absolutely. And finally, he had 4 possibilities about what happens to a Tathāgata, that's an enlightened being, a Buddha after death.
Ah, okay. What were they?
Does the Tathāgata exist after death? Does he not exist? Does he both exist and not exist? Or does he neither exist nor not exist?
Wow. Okay, that covers like all the logical bases on that one. That's quite a list he was wrestling with.
It is, and he felt so strongly that he basically decided on an ultimatum.
An ultimatum.
From the Buddha.
Yep. He planned to go right up to the Buddha and ask these questions point blank. And he decided if the Buddha answers them, great, I'll keep practicing under him.
And if not?
If not, he resolved then and there to just abandon the training, give it all up.
That's incredibly bold. Basically saying, answer my philosophical queries or I'm out.
It really highlights that desire for certainty, doesn't it? Yeah. He wants the map fully drawn before he takes another step on the path. Maybe less trust in the process, more demand for intellectual satisfaction first.
So what happens? Does he go through with it? He does. He approaches the Buddha, lays out his complaints, these undeclared points, and states his ultimatum.
And the Buddha's reaction, this is the crucial part, right?
It really is. Because the Buddha doesn't jump into a metaphysical debate. He doesn't answer the questions about the world or the afterlife.
No. What does he do?
He kind of turns it back on Māluṅkyaputta, gently, but very pointedly. He asks him a couple of counter questions.
Okay, like what?
First, he asks, Māluṅkyaputta, did I ever say to you, come live the holy life under me, and I will declare these views to you?
Ah, did I promise you this?
Exactly. And then he asks, and did you ever say to me, Venerable Sir, I will live the holy life under you only if you declare these views to me?
So was this ever part of our deal, our agreement?
Precisely. And Māluṅkyaputta has to answer honestly.
And his answer is?
To both questions, he says, no, Venerable Sir.
Okay. So no promises were made on either side regarding these specific questions.
Right. And then the Buddha delivers the concluding remark, which is quite striking. So, foolish man, who are you accusing? Or maybe, who are you contradicting here?
Wow. That really shifts the ground, doesn't it? It's not about the answers anymore, but about the legitimacy of the demand itself.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? How often do we impose conditions, maybe unspoken ones, on our own learning, our own growth, our own well-being, expectations that were never actually part of the agreement?
That's a really powerful point. We set up these invisible barriers based on assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And the Buddha doesn't just stop there, right?
Yeah.
He uses an analogy to really drive the point home.
Yes, and it's perhaps one of the most famous analogies in the Buddhist texts, the parable of the poisoned arrow.
Ah, yes, I've heard of this one. It's very vivid.
Incredibly vivid. It's a perfect metaphor for, well, prioritizing what's truly urgent. The Buddha tells a story about a man who's been shot, wounded by an arrow dipped in poison.
Okay, that's serious. Life-threatening.
Extremely. His friends, his family, they rush to help. They bring a surgeon to remove the arrow quickly before the poison spreads.
Makes sense. That's the obvious, urgent thing to do.
But the wounded man refuses. He says, wait, before you take this arrow out, I need to know some things.
You're kidding? What could possibly be more important than getting the arrow out?
Well, according to the man in the parable, quite a lot. He insists on knowing who shot him. What was the shooter's caste? Was he a warrior, a priest, a merchant, a servant?
Oh, come on.
And what was his name? What was his clan? Was he tall, short, or medium height? Was his skin dark, brown, or golden?
Seriously. While he's bleeding out with poison spreading.
And it gets even more detailed. Where was the shooter from? Which village or town or city? And what about the bow? What kind of bow was it? What was the bowstring made of? Was it fiber or reed or sinew or hemp?
This is almost comical if it weren't so serious in the context.
And the arrow itself, he wants a full specification. What wood was the shaft made from? What kind of feathers were used for the fletching? Vulture, heron, falcon, peacock?
Good grief.
What kind of sinew was used to wrap it? And the arrowhead, what type was it? Was it barbed, razor-edged, triple barbed, shaped like a calf's tooth?
Right.
Or maybe like an oleander leaf?
Okay, I get the picture. The list is absurdly long and completely irrelevant to the immediate crisis.
Exactly. And the Buddha's punchline is stark. That man would die. He would absolutely die from the poison long before he ever got answers to all those questions.
Because he was focusing on completely the wrong thing. He missed the point entirely.
He missed the urgent reality of his suffering right here, right now, because he was lost in, well, secondary details, peripheral information.
So how does this connect back to Māluṅkyaputta and his big philosophical questions?
The Buddha draws the parallel directly. He says, anyone who insists, I won't live the holy life under the Blessed One until he declares whether the world is eternal or not eternal, finite or infinite, and so on, down the whole list.
Yes.
That person, too, would die, metaphorically speaking, in terms of spiritual progress, or perhaps even literally without finding peace long before the Tathāgata ever declared those things, because the living of the holy life itself doesn't depend on those answers.
Ah, I see. The practice, the path itself, isn't contingent on having those cosmic blueprints figured out.
Precisely. And this is where the Buddha states very clearly why he doesn't declare those views. He says they are simply not connected with the goal. The Pali is attasanita. They're not relevant to the purpose.
Okay. Not connected to the goal. What else?
They are not fundamental to the holy life, nadi brahmacaryaka. They aren't the starting point or the core of the practice.
Right.
And crucially, pondering them, getting answers to them, does not lead to the things that actually matter for liberation. It doesn't lead to disenchantment with the cycle of suffering. It doesn't lead to dispassion or to cessation or to calm.
It doesn't lead to direct knowledge, enlightenment, or Nibbana, the ultimate goal.
Exactly. They are, in essence, a distraction from the path that does lead there, which prompts that question for you, listening now. Are there fascinating intellectual questions, maybe even spiritual-sounding ones, that are actually subtly distracting you from dealing with the core issues, the poison, in your own life?
That's a searching question. So if those are the things the Buddha doesn't declare because they're not helpful, what does he declare?
Oh, well, he's very clear about that, too. He says, what then have I declared?
And the answer is?
This is suffering, dukkha. I have declared that.
Okay, the first noble truth.
This is the origin of suffering, dukkha samudayo. I have declared that.
The second noble truth. The cause.
This is the cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodho. I have declared that.
The third. The possibility of ending it.
And this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Dukkha nirodha gaminitepada. I have declared that.
The fourth noble truth. The Eightfold Path. So he declares the four noble truths.
Yes. The diagnosis, the cause, the prognosis, and the prescription, you could say.
And why these? Why are these declared when the others aren't?
Because, he says, these things are connected with the goal, atasanyata. They are fundamental to the holy life, adi brahmacaryaka.
They're relevant. They're core.
And because understanding them, working with them, does lead directly to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, calm, direct knowledge, full enlightenment, and Nibbana.
It's striking how practical and immediate that feels compared to the abstract speculations about the universe.
It's entirely practical. The focus is squarely on understanding your present experience of suffering and engaging the path that leads out of it. It's about transformation, not just speculation.
So if we bring this all together, the core wisdom here, for you listening, seems to be about discernment.
Right.
About learning to tell the difference between knowledge that genuinely helps you get free from suffering and knowledge that's just interesting maybe, but ultimately a detour.
Absolutely. The Buddha's silence wasn't ignorance. It was a very deliberate teaching strategy. A refusal to get sidetracked by discussions that don't serve the primary aim, ending suffering here and now.
So it encourages us to look at our own lives, perhaps. What are the poisoned arrows that need our immediate attention right now?
And what questions are truly essential for your well-being, for your progress on whatever path you're on, versus those questions that might just be intellectual rabbit holes or even, very subtle ways we procrastinate on doing the real work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Using complex questions to avoid simple, maybe harder actions.
It can happen.
So our deep dive into the Cūḷamāluṅkyovādasuttaṃ really brings out this powerful principle. Not all questions are created equal in terms of their benefit.
The Buddha's approach shows this liberating clarity focus on what directly addresses the suffering you actually experience. Don't get lost in the infinite forest of speculation.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you to reflect on.
What unanswered questions are you maybe holding on to, perhaps without even fully realizing it? Questions that might actually be preventing you from pulling out the most pressing, poisoned arrow in your own life right now.
And could it be that letting go of the need for those definitive abstract answers might actually, paradoxically, open up the way to a deeper kind of understanding, a more impactful sense of well-being? Something to consider.
Definitely. Take a moment maybe after this to just reflect. What knowledge, what focus truly serves your highest purpose right now?